Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Florida Spiritist Federation and Conscious Living Spiritist Group, we are very grateful for being here this morning to listen about this wonderful topic, Joanna de Ângelis' approach to death. And this morning, we're going to have a great speaker, Suzana Simões. But before we start, before I introduce her, we're going to listen a short prayer. So let's elevate our thoughts to God, our Father, Jesus, our Master, and the good Spirit responsible for this meeting. We ask you, God, to open our minds and hearts to understand the lesson of this morning, to inspire our great speaker, for her to bring with clarity the results of her studies and helping us to understand and being able to use these lessons in our everyday life. In your name, God, and Jesus, and the good spirits, our meeting is open now. So be it. Okay, my friends, it's a great pleasure to have this morning Suzana Simões. She's a great contributor for the Spiritist movement, not only in Florida, but in the other states in this beautiful country. And today she's going to talk about Approach to Death by Joanna de Ângelis. Suzana Simões is also the co-founder of the Conscious Living Spiritist Group. So with great honor, I'll introduce you, Suzana.
So good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be here at Conscious Living today, doing this work in partnership with the Spiritist Federation of Florida. I would like to welcome every and each one of you who are here that I'm seeing right now in front of me, as well as everyone who is following us from home concurrently, or that will be watching this presentation later at a later time. I would like to say a few words about this work. I was inspired and moved to do a study around the topic of death 2 years ago when my father passed away. So this work is in loving memory of my own dad. And today we will be sharing with you the first part of what it will be a series of talks around the topic of death and life. And I have identified in the books that I have at home from Joanna de Ângelis, I think, I didn't count, but I think I have about 25 or 30 books in my personal library. And in going through them, I have so far identified the topic of death, immortality, in 20 of those books. What I bring you today is my first research in the first 10 books. So I have 10 sitting on top of my desk that I will be researching, reading, studying, and adding information to this work. From the first 10 books that I have researched the topic, we have in English the following ones: Plenitude, Life Challenges and Solutions, Times of Health and Consciousness, and Glorious Days. So you will see references that I bring today that don't have the name of the book because the book is not yet available in English. But those are the ones that are part of this first talk that we are doing here today. And they are available for purchase at Amazon, as well as at the website of Leal Publisher. And I highly, highly recommend that you visit those sites and purchase these books. They have outstanding messages of life for all of us and hope. So the goals for the work today, but also the whole work that we are just about to embark and to begin here together with you all today are to become acquainted with the idea of death, to become certain about the idea of life. And here I would like to highlight something. You see the word life throughout the presentation, sometimes with capital L and sometimes with the small l. And the difference is that when you see it with the capital L, I'm talking about immortal life. Whereas if you see the small l, I'm talking about physical life. This distinction is not necessarily present in all the text, but I have made that. So you might see, well, that's not how Joanna wrote in this book, but I'm doing this just for the purpose of our goals here. We are going to redefine life and death. We are going to hopefully be better prepared to die, but also to live. We are going to recognize the importance of detachment. We are going to acknowledge and honor the trial and the difficulties of dealing with death. We are going to build resources to cope with the death, our own and of others, and to properly grieve in order to properly live. We are going to be educated and empowered to make choices during the dying process, our own and others. We are going to gain understanding of the social conditions after death. And last but not least, we will beat death together. So this is the course that we are going to travel together, if you're willing to join me, not only today, but in the lectures that are being prepared for a near future. For today, it is our goal to tackle the first three ones. So let's see if we can do that. And before we dive into the work of Joanna de Ângelis, and again, why Joanna? Because that is studied and is analyzed and is taught and is processed throughout pretty much her entire body of work. And she brings us the spiritual, but also the psychological approach, the scientific psychological approach to death, which really enriches our understanding and experience of the process and the meanings of dying. But before getting to Joanna, I would say that this would be also one of our goals. When I go to the letter of Paul to Corinthians 15:55, when he says, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" So hopefully by the end, we'll be able to ourselves ask the same question. So the very first thing is to accept the invitation by Joanna de Ângelis to think about that, to talk about that. So that is usually this big white elephant in the room that no one wants to acknowledge. And very often in my experience, every time I have attempted to talk about death in daily life with people, the reaction that I get is like, ooh, or let's talk about something else. Or why are you wanting to talk about that? Are you depressed? Right? I mean, what's wrong with you? And so we are constantly changing subjects. Let's talk about something lighter, right? So there is an incredible level of discomfort in talking about the topic. And this level of discomfort becomes an incredible problem because, as we will see, that is part of life. In fact, it is something that happens from the moment we are born, we start to die. It's something that we will have to deal with sooner or later in our lives. And most of us will get to that point or will be struck by the death of a loved one and find ourselves deeply unprepared emotionally and spiritually to undergo the process with tools in a resourceful and healthy way. So it's interesting because Joanna will highlight to us in many of her books the necessity of talking about death. So here is some of her invitation for us. Meditate on the transience of the organic car, its continuous transformations, its wear and tear as you move in it, and you will be induced to think about what will occur after the biological phenomenon of your death or cell breakdown. Just simple ideas, right? We look at ourselves, we look at our physical bodies, especially when we are very healthy, and we are oblivious to the fact that within us, there is so much life, there is so much movement, there is so much transformation going on each and every minute. There is so much wear and tear, destructions. There is the vital principle that's kind of going away naturally as we are using it. And there is a number of phenomena that goes on each and every minute that we don't get to witness with our physical eyes, but nevertheless, they are happening. They are there. So to think about this, to be conscious of these transformations, I mean, as we go to, I don't know, 50 for sure, we definitely start feeling the wear and tear on the physical body. And more often than not, we deal with it. We experience the discomfort, but we don't go too far with it. Like, what does that truly mean, right? In the continuity of our physical life. So I would like to warn you that I should have done that in the very beginning, that this is not a comfortable talk. So if you are highly anxious and have severe levels of discomfort, take a deep breath and hang on, because things will get better. But it does bring highlights, brings out in some people, I would say in all of us, just to a greater or lesser extent, some of our anxieties and some of our natural fears related to the topic, because we all have some level of discomfort, and that is natural. It's natural because we have within ourselves the power, the strength of the preservation instinct that pulls us, grounds us, keeps us in the physical life, and other forces that we'll get into later on, probably not today, when we talk and address the fear of death. So it's natural. It's okay. You're not an inferior being because you have some natural discomforts with the idea. It's part of being incarnated in this physical body the way we are. In another moment, she will say, it is understandable and necessary for the intelligent being to reserve time for reflection around this inexorable fatalism. Delays in the necessary reflection about death for materialists, fear or illusion hides the psychological immaturity that time will discount. It will not be because one ignores this reality that will cease to exist. The more it is analyzed and comprehended, the better for its overcoming, making it part of everyday events. So reserve time for reflection. So if I would ask you, and you don't have to answer, when is it necessarily that you reserve time in your life to think about the fact that you will not guarantee be here in this physical body forever? What are the implications of that? What does that mean to you emotionally, spiritually? How do you see your departure? What difficulties do you foresee having with the process? So if we have not taken any time to think about those things, Joanna invites you to do so. And doing so means that we are growing in terms of psychological maturity, because we are becoming spiritual adults with a greater understanding of what life is, with small l and capital L. And ultimate, the entire purpose of talking, thinking, processing that is to grant us more life, is to allow us to be here, fully present, and more alive than ever. So thinking about those things, and hopefully that's one of the outcomes of this talk today and this series of talks, is to give us an opportunity to live and to be alive, much more fully, abundantly alive at any moment of our spiritual existence, whether we are inside this physical body or outside of it. So it's promising. It's a promising outcome for all of us. So, all right, so when is the appropriate time to start talking about that? And Joanna is going to answer for us when she's going to say, I love this expression, the illusion of bodily eternity. So we want to live forever inside the physical body, preferably. That would be awesome, right? The illusion of bodily eternity happens when young people transfers to old age the examination of death, or when healthy, they postpone the same reflection to the period of diseases, believing to be invulnerable to wear and degenerative phenomena of matter. They accompany the occurrence of death everywhere with other people, but they believe it will not occur to them, at least not for now, and now that lasts an indefinitely time. So who can relate to this, right? I'm too young. That is for older people. Or I'm very healthy right now. I'm too busy doing. Why should I be thinking about, a more frail moment of my life? Why should I consider those things? Why should I waste my time with those things if I can do that later on? Not knowing what later on means, right? Because later on can be tomorrow. Later on can be later today. Not that anyone should feel uneasy with these statements, but that is true. And how about the second paragraph where say, I don't want to talk about this for now. But then now never ends, right? It's a forever now. And again, life passes by and we don't get to do the work that it's important and it's necessary in so many different ways and levels. And finally, she'll say, thus one must live preparing to die, meditating on that, so as not to suffer the distress, avoiding despair and all its entourage of disturbing agents. So one must live preparing to die. And this is not to be distressing or a downward force in our lives. Like I said, on the contrary, this should be an uplifting force. And we will see later on how is that so. But not to suffer the distress, avoiding despair. I think that is a very important concept, because a lot of times, because of our unpreparedness, when someone that we love dies, whether through a natural aging process or perhaps suddenly through an accident, a lot of times, on top of the natural grief process, there is despair. There is this sensation of disharmony and chaos, emotional and spiritual chaos that takes place, and a number of disturbing agents that are the result of this process. So sometimes it comes a time in our life where we finally realize how incredibly frail our physical bodies are. And while still living in the physical body, the creature starts to experience a number of disturbing emotions that lead to pathology and death prior to dying, such as depression. So there are so many individuals that fully unprepared to die and fully in denial or in ignorance of the true meaning of life. Once they realize that they are actually mortal in the physical body, they will enter a level of despair that will trigger a number of psychological conditions, phobias, fears, depression. And a lot of times the person will try to, in a very paradoxical phenomenon, escape life, although in deep fear of death. So talking about the dying process, bringing it to our consciousness, becoming acquainted to it, helps us, again, to undergo the process with all the feelings and emotions there are certainly fair to have, but without ever losing the ground or necessarily going into a level of disarray that brings different pathologies and conditions that could be otherwise avoided. So, gosh, it's really scary, this whole thing. So I entered on Google, right? Death. And these really terrified images came up on my Google search. That was like, no way, close this thing very quickly. And when we get to fear of death, we will, go deeper into these things. All these associations and images that we have with that certainly don't help us in, welcoming the natural phenomena into our lives. But, this whole conversation about the right time of dying brings up this little story that Joanna is going to share with us, where this servant, very dedicated to his master, he every day, one of his functions is every day to go to the market and buy this very special fragrance that the master really liked it a lot. And so that day was no different. He left to the market, and but when he arrived at the market, he saw this very somber figure. And very quickly, he realized who the figure was. And the figure looked at him and got so startled, so scared, that pulled a little notebook from his pocket and start going through his own notes, trying to figure out something. While the somber figure was doing that, the servant realized and was sure that it was death, and that death was there to take him with it. So he runs back to the house and talks to the master and says to the master that he's very young and he's not ready to die. And he had crossed paths with that at the market, and that he was going to run away to a different city. And the master, who loved him very much and was moved and touched by the story and the event, gave him the means, the resources, and so he went. On that same moment, he took off and went to this distant town. Later in the same day, the master, still needing and wanting a little bit more of that fragrance, he goes back to the market. And to his surprise, he sees exactly the same figure over there. He is sure it is exactly the same person. Let's call it a person. And courageously, he approaches the somber figure and says, "Why are you here disturbing everyone? And you already disturbed my servant earlier today. Why are you doing this?" And the figure looked at him and said, "I am very confused, and I was very startled, because indeed I didn't come here to disturb anyone, but indeed it is here on my commitments for today to take the spirit of that man with me, but in a different place, not here." And Joanna is going to analyze the story, saying, obviously, he escaped to the place where death is supposed to meet him. And the point is that we cannot escape the natural processes. They are happening inside each one of us right now as you listen to me and as I speak to you. So it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And I know you don't like me very much right now. It's not like a good thing. I come to the center to feel good. And what is happening right now, right? But it is what it is. And we know that since we are little kids. So to help us to cope with this discomfort, let's look at how Joanna defines for us life and life. So here is a drawing of Siddhartha. And he asks his disciples at some point what they thought was the opposite of death. And they responded with certainty that the opposite of death was life. And he looked at them and gave them the following answer: the opposite of death is rebirth, because there is only and always life, whether the spirit roams through the physical body or outside it. So that is one first concept that I really want us to start to think, but also to feel. And that is something that I hope this talk and the future talks can help us in experiencing. Not only the cognitive understanding of the concepts, but that we truly feel those ideas in our hearts and in our souls. So we tend to think and to talk about life and death as a dichotomy, as separate things, when in reality, there is only one thing in the universe, which is life. And these are not separated events, but there is a continuity. And life is made of rebirths, is a succession of rebirths. We are at some moments being reborn in the physical body, and some moments we reborn outside of the physical body. And these, my dear friends, this is life. And there are so many ways in why life needs to be like this. And we'll get to them, but let's continue on with Joanna, now in glorious days. So she says that death and rebirth are complementary processes because they are part of the same phenomena, the phenomena of life. So here we start to kind of pull those things together and understand that life and death are not oppositions, they're actually partners. They're partners. They're partners, and they work together in such a divine mechanism to promote life, life within us. So Joanna is going to define death as the liberation from the cocoon which the immortal spirit is enclosed. Small mental exercise for us. Love the idea, love the image of the cocoon and the butterfly coming out of it. So we are going to substitute all those Google images, and we're going to imagine. I want you to literally imagine right now, to think about someone that you love and that has passed away. And you are going to imagine that that person broke the cocoon. And it's free. And has accomplished, has fulfilled that time of imprisonment, of transformation, so that he or she could break the cocoon more beautiful, more wholesome, more alive than ever. So that little by little, we start to shift our perception and the feelings that go along with what we think that is. And start to change the perspective in which we consider the process of dying and the process of living. She's going to say, a moment comes to everything and everyone where the vital flow is interrupted and the organic cocoon disconnects, victimized by the phenomena of death, also part of life. So again, here she's helping us to put those phenomena in a line that is a continuum line, as opposed to in separate places. It's continuity. And life comes to an end because each one of us is granted by God with a tank of gas. Think about that, right? Some of us has truck tanks. Some of us have big old tanks, right? Some of us comes with lots and lots of gas to live until, like my older patient right now, probably 106, right? And some of us are here for a shorter period of time. But we are given this tank of gas that is the vital fluid. It can be, we can fuel our own tank. There are resources that we do so when we eat, for example, by breathing, by receiving passes, everything that brings us with energy. But the reality, and this is what we need to understand, is that even though we can replenish the tank from time to time, there is a force, the force of life, the doing, the exercising, the expenditure of energy. It comes to a point that it can no longer be replenished, and it will come to an end. And when it comes to an end, the body can no longer heal itself. And we start to experiencing the failure of the organs because there is no longer enough vitality to promote the healing process or the replenishment, like our skin, for instance, right? That it's constantly being replaced by new skin, by new layers. But it gets to a moment, and I see this every day in my work, where the skin will no longer heal. And the elderly, in its more frail state, will start to experience the process of wounds and the difficulty with wound healing, because the elements of vitality are not there the way they were. Human beings are still pondering about life and death, this traditional duality of phenomena that ultimately is only a unity, it's missing an N over there, in two aspects considered, the physical and the spiritual. So again, Joanna helping us to shift from the perception of two separate things to one thing. It's one phenomenon, it's the phenomenon of life, but we are looking at different aspects of the same phenomenon, life inside and life outside of the body. It's repetitive, but it needs to be repetitive. We need to read and to repeat many and many times within our minds so that it can actually spill from being a cognitive understanding to see something that we truly, truly feel and truly, truly believe in the depths of our souls, that there is only life in the universe. She continues on by saying, to be born, to live, to die are terms of the same biological equation. And to continue to live is the fatality of creation. That is so beautiful. I must say, in reading and studying and putting these things together, many times I stopped and I was like in awe with the grandiosity of life. And as I say it, I feel it. Because you come to the conclusion that there is this really, really amazing big source of love out there that created us for nothing else but to live. Create us to nothing else but to continue, to explore, to grow, and to one day be one with it in a full manifestation of life and love. That is what you are destined to. That is what your loved one that is no longer here with you is doing right now. He or she is fulfilling God's mission, is soaring, is moving on, is progressing towards the light. We are still stuck in this phase of physicality that is so important and so necessary for the development of the God within. But our real state, our real life, the life where the spirit is together, the senses, the sensibility, the intelligence, the capabilities are in full expression, only happens when we are outside of the physical body. And your loved one is having the privilege, the blessing of being experienced that life. which awaits for all of us as well. No matter how much one resists or ignores the incessant biological changes, they continue to occur automatically because life is a partner of death. And this is the portico of entrance into big life. So life is a partner of death. It's a partnership. Those two processes, again, work together to propel us forward. Undoubtedly, the body you use will die. No question. You are not the clothing that is corrupted, but the spirit that commands the cellular mortar. Just as you have arisen in the physical world, you will depart from it by the imposition of carnal transformation. Before incarnating the organic vehicle, you live independent of it, and thus you will proceed after the molecular consumption. So here she brings us the idea that we pre-existed the physical body. We incarnated, and we will return to the condition that we were previous, before our incarnation. And I put in bold there that we are not the clothing that is corrupted. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in another opportunity. But how much we identify our sense of self and being with this physical body. That identification becomes an incredible problem when it's time to age and it's time to die. Because if your identity, if your sense of self, and most importantly, your sense of worth is deeply attached to something that is deteriorating each day, my dear friend, you're in trouble. And the crisis is just down the corner. We can fight to remain young in the physical body. I was watching another day something on Instagram about some wild research that's being done to keep the brain young, and some achievements have been made in this area. And thank God for science that helps us to stay here as long as we can. I work with the dying every day. And so, we, as professionals, healthcare professionals, we have our own jokes. And one of them is, it's very difficult to die today. You are trying to go and science holds you back. I mean, we are living longer and longer and not necessarily better a lot of times. And I'm looking at these folks I'm like, oh my Lord, what is it that I want for myself at the end of my life? How I want my life to be? Question, homework for you. Are you looking into extension of years, or is quality of life your priority? We'll get to that in later lectures. Hopefully everybody will be curious to hear about that. Because as a hospice practitioner, that's what we do every day. So, but again, getting back to this identification with the physical body, it's something for us to think about. It's something for us to consider as we are thinking and processing this whole idea of our mortality in the physical body. She also is going to reflect on movement, destruction, and transformation. We're going to go over, let's see, time-wise, how we're doing here. Let's go over this. I do have a few more slides after this reflection, but I'll stop. So maybe another 5 minutes, because I will give time if someone wants to make a comment or ask questions. So I will leave a little bit of time for that. I'll close with these next slides. And the purpose of today was just to start the conversation and lay some fundamental principles that can help us to think the process as we move forward. But let's look at movement. Right, movements misspelled. I apologize. So throughout the universe, rest does not exist, since the incessant movement is the central spring of its balance. Similarly, all biological phenomena are under ongoing change, alternating the molecules that make them up and disrupting shapes without ever extinguishing. The important concept that Joanna brings us here is that everything in the universe is moving. So like I mentioned before, although you look at your skin and you don't see it moving here necessarily, there's tons of movements happening beyond your physical eyes, what your physical eyes can see. And it is precisely the movement of things that keeps the balance of the universe. Why is it important for us to think about movement as being an essential part of life and essential part of balance? Because a lot of times we want to cling to things as they are. A lot of times we want for things not to change, not to move. Or if I could just stay here with things the way they are. Well, if you stay there with things the way they are, you are dying while alive. It is precisely the movement, the change, the transformation that keeps the universe evolving and that keeps life in balance. So when we look at the deterioration of matter in front of our eyes, it's not an absolute destruction, because what happens is that matter is going to disintegrate to its most primitive elements, and those elements will recombine in the creation of new forms, of new matter, as we know and understand with our physical senses. And she's going to say, traveler of time and space, the spirit, thinking energy that is, sails the oceans of energy, dressing and undressing and lining itself from organic matter to the ministry of evolution in whose course is inscribed. Wow, how beautiful this sentence is. We are thinking energy. And we are sailing through the oceans of energy, sometimes more subtle, sometimes more dense, dressing and undressing, lining ourselves with organic matters to the ministry of evolution. This is the purpose of life. The purpose of life is evolution. Once we were created by God, who thought of us, who loved us, who want us to exist, we are, whether we want or not, whether we are conscious or not, we inscribe, we are registered. God automatically registers, like we do with our kids, in this evolutionary course. So the course has different experiences, different type of classrooms. And sometimes we are in a classroom like this one, and sometimes we are in the classrooms of the spiritual realm. But we are all living and growing and progressing and fulfilling the higher purpose of our own existences. So I hope that by now it feels like that to die is not necessarily so horrible. It's not easy for the ones who stay behind, and we will talk about that. Because one of the most important things for us to continue to live well in the physical body is to grieve process properly the ones who leave us temporarily. So this talk is not meant to deny the pain and the difficulty. It's not meant to minimize the suffering. It's not meant to dismiss in any way, shape, or form the outstanding trial that is for us in our level of evolution. but it is meant to set the ground for us to understand in our minds and in our hearts, and to find consolation and hope, and also grace and gratitude in living. I'll close here. To understand that as destructive activity would be tacit and irrational acceptance that nothing produce everything, just to soon return to the non-existing, consuming the intelligent and vital pulse of the universe, which would mean the return to the chaos of the beginning. So if destruction would really, really exist, what that means is we are accepting the idea that nothing produce everything, and everything that exists soon is going to come to an end, go back to nothing, and to the chaos of the beginning, where there is just void and nothingness. So the point of this slide is that destruction makes no sense. Makes no sense. And proves the point that there is no destruction, only transformation in life. That's it. So I'll leave you with your thoughts, feelings. If you have a therapist, you can call the therapist if necessary, right? But if not, there is a cheaper approach. Buy Joanna de Ângelis books, read them, deepen your knowledge into the subject, do your own research, talk about it with your family members, with your spouse, with your friends, because in talking, we are also processing and we are digesting all these material that ultimately, again, it's going to bring us peace, it's going to bring us health, and it's going to bring us harmony. I'll pass it on back to the Federation to see if there are any questions, and also to you guys to see who are present here with me, if anyone has any comments or any questions.
Sue, I'd just like to explore a little bit more about this question of delaying death, or people who have these medical interventions, and so then the other side of the coin is, is euthanasia a possibility? I know from Spiritism that suicide, is a no-no, but there's a very fine balance between those two. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a very. I'm going to repeat the question here. So he's talking about the balance between prolonging life, cutting life short through euthanasia, and I guess what is the balance for how long you prolong life? How you. What's reasonable, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, tough. Very tough. I intend to have one entire lecture just to talk about that. And in this lecture, I want to bring not only the spiritist understanding, but a lot of the medical understanding today related to the dying process, which we don't find much in the spiritist literature. So I deal with people. I have a very recent case of a lady who was, I think, 93, 95 years old. She fell. She was hospitalized, and she needed to get a feeding tube. She wasn't swallowing properly. The son, very dedicated to the mother, did not accept that she was going to need a feeding tube, and she needed to go to rehab for to deal with the healing of the hip fracture. He, for love, wanted to take her home and take care of her, and so she ended up, not living. She ended up having a escaping the word in she swallowed the wrong way. And she ended up dying of respiratory insufficiency through that process. So this is a case that talks like sometimes about our attachments and our difficult in accept the deterioration of our loved ones. Is one side of the coin that we deal every day. There are patients who will not sign a DNR, do not resuscitate, for an elderly individual who is, again, past 90 years old, who is frail, and to whom a DNR would, for example, cause immense suffering because of the aggressiveness of the maneuver that very often leads to broken ribs, also the sternum. And when the body is naturally failing. And so at what point do you it's very tricky. So it's a little less tricky when the person is already in the natural process of dying. Sometimes when things happen early on and there is, important decisions to be made. But for now, the one thing that I want to say that I think is very important to highlight on the spiritualist perspective is that life in the body has a purpose. Whether the body is healthy, able, disabled, as long as there is organic life going, the person is breathing and natural life has not ceased, that life has a purpose, has a spiritual purpose. And that's one of the things that in spiritualism, I think, differentiates from the more materialistic thinking. You looking at the body, if you don't have the perspective of immortality and the purpose to understand that situation where apparently nothing is happening, there is movement and life happening, although the body is not able to manifest that, but the spirit is undergoing an important process, a lot of times of healing and preparation for the proper passage. A lot of times in the materialistic view, those processes are denied, are ignored, and compromise the passage of the spirit. Again, it's a very loaded question and one that I will need an entire lecture to be able to properly answer. Yes.
So today marks 8 years since my dad also discarnated today.
Mm-hmm.
And you were present, you were there a lot for the process. But I remember that when my dad was doing his documentation about DNR and stuff, I told him that I did not want to make that decision to put me second in line, only because, what if you make the wrong decision, right? That's a very complicated things, and we get a lot of questions in spiritism about that, because I think intention plays a huge role, right? But I was so afraid that his partner would not be available and I would have to make that decision,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I don't know if there's anything we can say to make it easier for those that have been appointed to make that very important, definite decision.
So what Andrea is asking is, she was asked to be the person to sign the DNR process for her father, who passed away 8 years ago on this day. So our thoughts go to him. But it's a very difficult decision. I think it's the decision becomes a little easier if you were dealing with someone who has a terminal disease and, again, is advanced in age. So when the time for that person comes, the person will go, right? A lot of times we have people in respirators, in ICU units, and eventually the machine can no longer hold them there. They will depart. So I think that trusting God, knowing that life comes, at what cost are you going to maintain that life, the acceptance of the natural process when someone is already advanced in age. It's already like in the terminal process of a disease that is progressive, that is, there's no resolution for that disease, allows for the person to naturally go in the time that is meant for him or her to go. Because if it's not meant, he or she won't go. So just being peace with that, understanding that that's the natural part of life again. It feels like I'm killing my loved one. You're not. You just allowing your loved one to fulfill the natural process and to go in a peaceful way, as opposed to being worked out and turned and flipped and whatever else they do in order to bring that heartbeat back, when life is saying it's time to go, and you can go, you can transition naturally. So on those moments, if you have the privilege and the honor to be there, the best thing to do is to hold that person's hand and do a prayer and help them in the process of going.
I don't know if we have time, but we have a question online.
One last question for today. We're going to take the online question.
I'm going to display. You can just say her name, so you don't have to repeat the question. It's being displayed online.
Okay.
She says, do you think that this old person, older than 90 years old, should have a DNR so he or she would not go through the hard process, or keep the person alive longer for the benefit of the spirit?
We keep someone alive longer for our own benefit. For our own benefit. And that's what we deal every day. That's what I deal every day. And we're going to talk about that. Joanna will address that. How, and I'm not saying this from a judgmental place. It's a very human thing. We want to keep our loved ones for ourselves. And a lot of times they are already in a body that is decaying in life, frail, non-responsive. And because of our misunderstanding and because of our own issues, we want to hold that person in a physical body that is, again, completely, it's done. It has done its role. It has fulfilled its role. But we want to keep the person. In those moments, we truly, truly think of ourselves and not on what is the best for the other one. I know that this is hard for us to hear. It's hard for me to say. I witness that every day. Every day at work, someone's died. Every day. And every day I get to witness the family dynamics. And the worst thing that can happen, and I say this to you, if you have siblings, please sit down and talk to your siblings about what's going to happen when your parents die. So that the moment of the decisions, we see that a lot. You have 3, 4 siblings. The person is dying and the siblings are fighting about what to do at the moment, the decision-making process. Why? Because no one had the courage, the maturity to sit down with the parents and to ask, Mom, Dad, what are your wishes? We need to know. Mom and Dad might say, are you trying to kill me before the time? And you're going to say, no, Mom, no, Dad. I want to be there for you. And I want to appropriately care for you according to your wishes and not mine. I want to honor you at this very, very important moment of your life. But it needs to be said. It's the biggest tragedy that I get to witness every day. So just keep that in mind. Yep. All right. So thank you so much. I will pass it back to Teresa.
Thank you.